Hi, my name is Kirt Kemp. I live in Berry County, and I think the story on this big boy starts in the summer before the season started. My two sons have a couple of really nice GoPros, so on the mile that was behind our house, we were driving down the roads every night videotaping them, and these fields had probably 25 bucks in them, and it was all summer long. And we estimate that he was probably the fourth smallest buck in the field. This one actually scores 155, but we think there was a 160 and a 170 in there, and maybe even a 180, and we got some videos of all those. So the bow season rolls around, and my boys didn't hunt with me. I just hunted the area pretty much by myself. They had other spots they wanted to hunt. So I put in probably a good 125 hours of hunting my three stands, probably overhunted them a little bit. Didn't see much. I passed up probably a dozen bucks, but nothing bigger than maybe your generic 8-point. So December rolls around and I don't have a deer, and on December 6th I thought, well, I better go out and take the shotgun out and maybe try to get a doe for some meat. And they made a change in the rules this year where you can hunt muzzleloading season with a shotgun. So I went out there, and I went out there way too early. It was probably 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I sat out there and I froze my butt off. So probably got about a half hour before dark, and I couldn't take it no more. My fingers were numb. I couldn't feel anything. My toes were numb. So I decided to get out and maybe walk up the trail back to my house and see what I could see. So I got out, and wasn't probably 2 minutes later, I took about maybe 60 steps, and I see down at the edge of my woods this buck standing with two does, and I didn't have any idea how big he was. I just knew it had horns. I pulled my scope up on him, and I said to myself, this is a buck, I'm gonna shoot it. So I touched it off, and no idea that I hit him. I thought I'd missed him actually. He ran out in a clover field with the two does, and they ran out about 200 yards, and they just stood there and stared at me. And they stared at me and stared at me for 10 minutes. And I got my Vortex binoculars out, and I just sat and watched them, and just killing myself for missing this thing. And once I looked at him through the binoculars, I realized what a tank he was. And I was just sick to my stomach. And so I sat there and watched him for a good 10 minutes, and all of a sudden he just plopped down. And I thought, what the heck, is this guy just gonna sit down and take a rest or what? Well, remind you, this is the heat of the second rut right here. It was 28 days after the first rut. So the doe just kind of wandered off, and I thought, that's not right. This buck's, hot to trot. He's gonna be after these does. And he just sat there. The does took off, disappeared. And he laid there and laid there, and I could just see him moving his head, and I watched him all the way till I couldn't see no more, with him just laying there moving his head around. And all of a sudden he got up and walked away and disappeared into the woods. And I'm like, well, this is not right. So I went home, called my best friends and called my kids and talked to them, and they all agreed that there's no way that buck was going to leave them does. So we gave it about 3 or 4 hours, and my son Dylan came over, and he brought his girlfriend Alyssa, and we went out there, and we found right away the spot where he was laying. I had that memorized, and found a bunch of blood, so I knew we hit him. And the woods that he went into was only maybe 40 or 50 yards away. So we walked over there, nosed around a little bit, and I ended up jumping him up right off the bat. And we heard him take off, and we could tell he was just crashing in the trees. We knew it was him. So we backed out right away. I figured I must have hit him in the back or something, towards the liver area. So next morning, I had to go to work, so my 18-year-old son Hunter was up and around, so I said, go stand in my tree stand. He ran right to where I was originally sitting, and you could see through the woods at the time, and maybe you can see him. So I went to work. I had a long night sleeping, which was virtually none, and went to work, and I get a text about 10 o'clock, I found your buck, Dad, and he says, you hit him in the ass. Well, that's not cool, but so my boss let me go home early, And I got home, and he didn't touch anything with him. He left him lay as is. My best friend Todd came over, and his two girls, and we went back there and we got it. And I couldn't believe it when I saw the size of this thing. He was a stud. So one kind of interesting note, he's got a nice graze right through here on his brisket. We didn't notice that until we were actually caping him out, and somebody snagged him with an arrow early in bow season and missed by about 6 to 8 inches. So they were probably pretty heartbroken. So that's pretty much how it went down, and it was very exciting. I'm not sure if he's my biggest buck ever. He was a 155 buck. I've shot 2 other 150 bucks, and I've got a little video of those. He's definitely my most symmetrical buck. He's a beautiful one, and I wouldn't give him back for anything in the world. And I feel very blessed to be able to harvest something like this.